So welcome to everybody who's joined us for the introduction to safeguarding for the voluntary sector. And I wondered whether Danny, Deborah and Gracelyn, as voluntary sector reps, would you like to introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll get started with the speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Deborah Williams, and I'm currently the program manager of the Youth Echo.
Nice to meet you, Deborah. Go for it, Danny.
Morning all, Danny White here. I'm the Programs Manager and Designated Safeguarding Lead for Sister System.
Lovely, thanks Danny for joining us. And Gracelyn?
Hi, I'm Grace. Gracelyn's a bit formal for me, but it's just my name, I suppose. But I work for the Bridge Renewal Trust and with Deborah, and I work on two projects. The Send Power in Haringey, we're a forum that supports parents and carers of children with special educational needs and disabilities. And I also support the Mental Health and Wellbeing project that's in collaboration with Mind in Haringey.
Oh, lovely to have you with us, Grace. Thanks. Pearls, I can see that you've just joined us. Sorry to put you on the hop, but we were just doing introductions. Did you want to quickly say your name and which organisation you represent?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us okay? Yeah, can hear you.
Right, I'm Pearls. Yeah, I'm Pearls Wisdom. My organisation is Say No to Joint Enterprise. So I'm an advocate for mothers whose children are caught up in the legal system.
Okay.
I support them, yeah.
That's great, thanks, Pearls. And just to let you know that the session is being recorded, so I hope that you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you.
That's lovely. Thanks very much. So if we get started, I don't know who wants to go first in terms of presenting. Don't know, Helen or Rob, maybe. Did you want to go first?
I'm happy to go first. It is what normally happens because I'm the front door, so I'm used to going first.
Do you want me to share?
I'm just going to say, are you sharing or shall I? Yeah, if you can, please, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. So my name's Helen Patton. I'm the service manager for MASH, which is the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, and EDT, which stands for the Emergency Duty Team. So I'm just going to give you a quick whistle-stop tour of the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, what we do, a bit of how we do it, and what we base our decision-making on. So that's me, and that's our email address. So and talk about threshold, and I have included the threshold document within the slides, so I'm sure the slides will be shared, so you can all, I'm not sure, I'm hoping, and then you can all have access to the information in the threshold document for your a bit of light bedtime reading. Next slide, please. So what is MASH? So as I said, it's the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub. So there's a lot of local authorities have a MASH where information is referrals are received, and then information is considered around them referrals about children and young people. So we have referrals on unborns up until young people have reached the age of 18, so it's across the whole childhood. And we have referrals, we look at the information and we make decisions, which I'll talk about shortly. And information share within a MASH, which is a very carefully managed sharing responsibility for all partners, and that information stays within MASH, and we make decisions on that and talk to our partner agencies. You may be very familiar with MASH. Like I say, a lot of local authorities have a MASH sort of system in place. They all operate slightly differently, but the concept is the same. The first one was in Devon very early on, and then the Haringey MASH has been in place since 2016. And since that time, there's been lots of changes and lots of amendments, hopefully for the better. Next slide, please. So this is just to give a flavour of how many referrals we receive into MASH. So you can see the, I know there's lots of numbers and figures, and sorry if anyone struggles to see that. So the green one is this year's. So you can see roughly it's around 1,000, 1,200 referrals every month into MASH that we look at and consider. So, you know, numbers are quite high, but they are quite stable as well. So, you know, it's important just to, you know, we are pretty stable in the numbers we're receiving into MASH. So this is just to give some idea on the figures, which is quite, you know, it's quite a lot. It's quite busy. It's a very busy MASH, very, very busy. Okay, next slide, please. I'm whizzing through because you can read all this and then I can answer your questions at the end. So this is the one of the important features is this windscreen of need. So I think it's important to, we all use this kind of concept in terms of where the concerns lie. So if we're working with a young person, a child, and we go, oh, that's what is that? There's something I can, you know, I can see there's some level of need, but what is that? Where does that sit? Is it universal, so which is like schools, health, which everyone can access? Is it some early help? So family might need some intervention of some sort, which is a voluntary intervention, you know, early help and assessment, some support, some parenting support, some ideas. Issues around behaviour, concerns, low-level domestic abuse, arguments. So some early help support, some intervention from our early help specialist service. And then moving through to level 3, which is obviously looking more serious around safeguarding. You might have heard it called Child in Need, Section 17, which is the legislation. So it is that family needs some more statutory intervention. So this is moving away from that sort of early help, what the offer that's open to everyone, to more specialist support from safeguarding social workers doing an assessment. And then you go into level 4, which is the red, where children are at risk of significant harm. You might have heard it called Section 47, which is a strategy meeting, which is a multi-agency meeting. So it's where you think a child is at risk of harm, and unless we intervene, that child will continue to suffer harm. So things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, you know, where that's emotional abuse, where that will continue unless we intervene. And obviously that's our, you know, the serious nature of social care. So all these, not the universal, the green, amber and red, they all come to the MASH and we screen them and send them where they need to go and make decisions. So one of the things we talk about all the time within MASH is the importance of sharing information, and nobody makes a decision all by themselves. Not me, not the managers, not the social workers. None of us make that decision by ourselves. And that's really important when you're making so many decisions every day, because, you know, we need that, we all need that check and balance, and that's really important. And one of the things we say on the threshold training that we do is it's really important to always talk to somebody, whether that be your, you know, the safeguarding lead, the manager, whoever, but it's always important to talk to somebody and have that conversation and go, there's something that doesn't feel quite right, and unpick that, what that means. So just to understand what that looks like in MASH, so the duty manager, we have 4 managers in MASH, and they are on a rotation of covering duty for a week. So every week they will look at all the referrals coming in and make that, determine that threshold, like based on the information we've got. It then moves over to an allocating manager who will then look at that more in depth. So look at have we worked with the family before? Has it just closed? What is this about? Is this familiar? Do we know about these kind of concerns, or are these new concerns? So they will look at that and make a more informed decision about where that moves on to. If we want that to go to a social worker, they will screen it. So they will call families, call parents, call children if necessary, older children. They might ask health for information, or education, or the police, or probation, or one of our partners. And then we gather all that information up, add that to the system, and then we look at that in its entirety and make a decision based on the Haringey threshold tool about what are the next steps. And that then goes back to a manager for that final sign off and the final RAG, which is the red, amber, green. So it is quite a, it sounds a lot, it sounds like the referral goes through a lot of processes, and it does, and that's really important because, like I say, it's about making sure the decisions we make, which are very timely decisions, but are the best decisions with the information we've got. And like any situation, it's a snapshot in time. So it's a snapshot about, so any visits you guys do, any intervention you do, it's a snapshot in time. And it's exactly the same with MASH, but we do obviously look then at the history. Next slide, please. So I've just mentioned this briefly. So we work on red, amber, and greens. We are very time limited. So 4 hours for red. So if we get a referral from somebody to say a child's been hurt, we have 4 hours to process that information. We usually do it a lot quicker, but we have got 4 hours if there was some information we needed additional. And the reds go over to our assessment team, and they will complete next steps, which is usually a strategy meeting. Amber, so 24 hours, obviously that's like, the next day. So, 24 hours, I can't describe what I mean. So that's not necessary. So it's 12 working hours. So it's kind of overnight. But we don't work overnight. So we, again, gathering information and looking at and making that final threshold decision. And the greens, which are sort of early help, less sort of urgent, we can do a bit more time, a bit more work, speak to parents, find out what is it they want, who is the best person, who can we signpost to, who can look at doing some work with that family, some support, and what is the level of support needed. And I've added in there the threshold guidance, so please have a look at that. It's on the HSCP website if you can't bear to wait until you get the slides, and you want to know what it's all about. So please do look at it. It is a guide, as it says on the tin, but it just gives some indication of what is risk at what level. So please have a look at that, and we do use that every day. So I've mentioned this a little bit in terms of where our referrals go. So basically there's a few options. So one is Step Up to Children's Social Care. So that's the social care assessment. One is it goes to early help, and early help offers some support, some targeted support. We can signpost, so we've got NIA, who's the Domestic Abuse Service, Heartstone, the Youth Offending Service, so there's lots of others that won't come to my mind, but we can signpost families to different services and look at doing referrals for support. or ask sort of the health visitor to pick some pieces of work up, the schools, and ask them to do some wishes and feelings work with the child. So a variety of sort of options. Or no further action. So what that is, you know, we don't feel the family need any support. They don't feel they need any support, so we will just close that down. Obviously, universal services will continue. And we try and make them decisions, like I say, in terms of the timescales. Of course, sometimes, you know, things come up and we need to gather more information, or we might get another bit of information in another referral in another form. So we have to consider that a bit more, and it takes a bit of a while longer. But generally, we do, as far as possible, try and maintain the timescales. Next, thanks. And like I say about our partners, so we do have the people who sit with us in a physical sense. So we've got the police, health, education, and NIA, the domestic abuse, and they work with young people who have been victims of a sexual assault crime. So they physically sit with us, and then we've got our partners who sit. We have a SPARC, which is stands for single point of contact, and this we reach out to the SPARC. So if we wanted information, say from probation, we would fill out an email, send it to them. They'd fill it in and send it straight back to us. And we've got probation, housing, early years, CAMS, adult social care, that should say, and I feel like there's something missing off there. And youth offending, so youth offending as well is an important partner. And that's one more slide. So of course it's important to capture the child's voice, and this is the start of a journey. So anything that goes onto social care or early help, which is subject to scrutiny, audits, you know, the child journey always starts within MASH, and so we want to make sure we capture the child's voice within that contact, within that referral, and make the right decisions. So it's like I say, it's a multi-agency decision, information sharing within MASH. We try to be very consistent because that's important, and the application of threshold. We try to have really positive conversations with families because there's the stigma of social care, which obviously we're well aware of, and try to think about, you know, the contact we have with families and how that makes them feel, and try and make that a positive one where as much as possible. We complete our own audits in MASH, so we have regularly, every month, the service managers do the audits of MASH, and we also do some, the managers do some internal audits and speak to parents and say, how was that experience? So we can learn from that. We meet every morning to have a conversation, to share sort of the figures and what everyone's got, but also a space if anyone wants to talk about anything that's happened, any challenges, any, you know, anything that's come up and was a bit unusual, and we can share information and have a discussion about that. And like I say, it is the start of the child's journey, so we want to be as open and transparent as we can be, and that's really important when people make referrals to MASH, that we've got that, you know, parents and carers are aware of any referrals that are made, because it's so important that people, you know, don't have that surprise of children's services ringing up and having that, you know, a bad start to that experience. And just the last one is just the numbers. So if you ever want to talk something through, we've got the MASH consultation line, advice line, whichever, and then the duty numbers, which is answered by social worker. If you're in doubt, give MASH a shout. It's a brilliant ditty. And, you know, do call us. So if you're worried about anything, just want to talk something through, then please call MASH and we can have them conversations and hopefully fingers crossed, give you some good advice. Over and out.
Thanks very much, Helen. I just wondered, has anyone on the call got any questions at all for Helen, just around the
Hopefully not death
process?
by PowerPoint.
No, not at all. No questions at all for Helen? You might think of something during the next presentation, perhaps. Shall we move on to Rob from the police to present around the police's role in child safeguarding? Over to you, Rob. If you're speaking, Rob, because you're currently on mute.
Yeah, no,
No worries.
apologies. I was just having to take a call.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, yeah, no, just following on from, sorry, my name's Rob Rigby. I'm the Detective Inspector for the Child Abuse Investigation Team for both Haringey and Enfield Police. So just following on from what Helen was saying, we get notified of child cases or of crimes in two different ways. So one will come via our operations room, which through 999 101, or from emails, and that will be from the victims themselves or from family members or from third parties to say that a child's at significant risk of harm or has been harmed. And then that will come, so that will go through to our child abuse investigation teams, which is made up of two teams. So there's an investigation team and there's a referral team, and the referrals will take on that crime. So once the crime's generated, it will go to our referrals desk, they'll assess it, and then that will then get referred on to social services. The other route into the police is through social services, so they'll send us, I don't have one to hand, but it's on an 87A, so they'll, once they're informed of a child that's at risk of harm, that will get sent to us on an 87A, and that goes through to our referrals desk. A crime report will be created, and then from both of those routes, once the crime reports were created and notification is either sent to the police or sent to social services, we have a strategy discussion, and that strategy discussion is around, as Helen was saying, whether it meets the threshold for a section 17, which will be for social services to investigate, or a section 47, which means that, that it could be a joint investigation with the police and social worker. So the police and the social worker will go out and visit that child, assess what's happening, and then the response will be taken on from there. So it might mean that parents might be arrested. It could mean that we assess it there and then, speak to the child, speak to family members, and it might be that the child is then put back into the family home because it's safe to do so. If it's not, then the child could be then placed into police protection or placed with another family member. And then the investigation then rolls on. So we conduct a police investigation for a criminal matter, and social services will conduct an investigation in parallel to that in relation to managing the family, managing the child, and seeing what other services are required for that child. We've also got an arm for what we call the police, for the police liaison officers. So it's for children that where there are concerns around a family, we take it to conference, and it means that by taking it to conference, we're able to put the child onto a plan, either for child abuse or for child neglect. And then it just means that there's more scrutiny around that family from police and other agencies, so that mum and the parents or the guardians have to have like a strict assessment around their care for that child. And that's just another arm of the police and what we do. And then What also happens is that social services might require, so after the strat discussion, they might require some more information from the police. So they send in a request on an 87B asking for more intelligence. And if it meets the threshold for that intelligence, for that information to be shared, because there's already an investigation ongoing, then we can then send it back on another form with the intel that we have on any intelligence that we have, or the information that social services require. Sarah, is there anything more that you need on that?
I guess it's open to the group, really. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask Rob in terms of the police's involvement in child safeguarding? Any questions about, child exploitation or children who go missing, for example? Any questions that you've kind of come across, that queries that you've always wanted to ask the police about child safeguarding?
I mean, I could add a bit about child exploitation,
Yeah, great,
if you
thanks.
wish. So child exploitation is another, it's dealt with by another team alongside our child abuse investigation teams. And where there are concerns that are raised and it comes through to the police, it's in a similar sort of thing. So it gets assessed, and there's a strategy discussion around it, around what are the concerns, how those concerns can be managed, and then again, it can be on a joint investigation basis. So the police will go out and conduct a police investigation in parallel to a social service investigation in relation to how best to protect that child, what can be done, and identifying any perpetrators within that. And so the concerns, again, are either from something that the social services have picked up during assessments, a pattern of behaviour. So the child is missing school. It's been found in different places across the country. They've been missing. So a lot of it's identified through missing episodes, and whether or not that child's been bought, luxury items like new trainers or new clothing, or has come into holding any cash that's been found, any different types of behavior, that kind of thing. And through that assessment, that's how we assess and score a child that we believe is under exploitation. And if they score highly, then obviously then that triggers a police investigation in relation to that. And then missing persons are very similar. Again, there's a missing persons unit where after 72 hours, there has to be a strategy discussion around that missing child for us to, we then have to work again in parallel to try and find that child and the triggers for that child to have gone missing. Is there any questions around that?
Yeah, could I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course you can.
I've heard a few cases where, for instance, that as you mentioned, when there's money being spent on this child, new trainers, food, sometimes, the perpetrators have paid their parents' bills, electricity, gas, whatever bills and all the rest of it. What happens when the police do come in and then there's a debt that's outstanding, that's been built up where this child is concerned? I've heard of them wanting the money back. They harass the family for the money. How does that part get sorted out? How is that?
Well, once the perpetrator, so it can happen in a number of ways. So if the family are willing to, so some families, it's very difficult because some families will cooperate and some won't for that specific reason. And if they are, then there are means and ways of doing it and strategies around it. Some means that we place them elsewhere so that we know that they're safe, and then we go after the perpetrators, bring them in, and then investigate it. In terms of the debt, that debt won't get paid, so they're not forced to pay that debt. it just remains outstanding. And we just then, that's our role in trying to protect that family against those perpetrators, which is where, as you can imagine, the challenges come in. But that debt, we don't pay, the family don't, we're not forced to pay that debt. We won't allow that to happen, because that's part and parcel of the exploitation, isn't it? So yeah, it's a bit like a drug. It's a bit like a drugs debt, where a child is given drugs, they're deliberately robbed of those drugs so that they then have to pay that debt. That's for us to protect that victim. That's for us to protect that child or family, whatever it might be, and then manage the perpetrators. So that's a challenge for the police.
Also,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question, but just to be a bit further. So when like, you say you move the family out, but do they then continue to get support wherever they're moved to, because now they want to
Yeah,
be
so
away from all the support networks?
yes, there are strategies around it, but that's where we work in partnership. So there'll be partnership with housing, be partnership with child services. There's different arms of the police that will be involved, and that's where the partnership come around. Health, it's all, that's where we all work as a partner, because there's different arms there to support that family, and so it's not just down to one agency.
Okay.
Go on. Yes, Helen.
I was putting my hand up the old-fashioned way, and I guess it's an interesting point you raised, Pearls, and I think it's one of them about all this comes, there's impact, isn't there? There's never not impact, and when families move out, I mean, it must be awful to leave your home and have to move to another home because of what's happened, and of course that will impact, and we can try and help and support where possible, but it is going to be a really tricky situation, and a really difficult, and it is like Rob says, it's important we all work together to try and help that is make it as seamless as possible, but I think it's a really, the depths of exploitation, which I think we're now starting to really understand and get our heads around and do something about. I think it's really it's it's like you say, if families are involved in that, it's really difficult then to make sure that young person is protected, and how best to do that is a collective. But if the young person isn't if the parents aren't involved in receiving the benefits, then it does make it easier in terms of working and getting the families on board with the support. But yeah, it's a really tricky, it's a really difficult area. I think we're learning and learning all the time about it, and that push-pull factors for young people. And obviously that money to families is a massive, especially in the climate we're in with, people being in poverty, and you've got money being offered. It's a real pull factor for people, unfortunately.
And the problem is now is that you've got perpetrators and gangs who are they've moved on, so they've identified the fact that we're identifying the issues through money, through luxury goods, and so they're changing their strategies. So we're finding it even harder now to identify exploitation, and it only comes about when that child is exploited, because they've disappeared and they've been found cross country in places right across the country, and generally because they've been arrested because they're in possession of drugs, and that's where it becomes really clouded and quite difficult to manage, and trying to solve. Deborah.
I understand this is quite a very complex issue, but I was thinking, is there any difference between how you would treat young people with special educational needs or neurodivergent, because they are actually more likely to be groomed into doing things because they're often quite lonely and they just need a friendship group.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's very difficult to sort of isolate that as an issue because you've got this wider problem of exploitation. The only way you can actually manage it and try and solve it from the outset is through sort of education. But you're right in the fact that people with neurodiversity are the ones that are easier to exploit, let's say, and it's easier to recognize, but it's like anything. Who is it who's going to be exploited? And it's identify. We're trying to prevent it, and if you're going to try and prevent it, that's through education. But you can't just single out one particular person that you think it could be exploited. There are, unless once the referrals come through and you're dealing with a child with neurodiversity, yes, that child can then be managed. But if that child isn't being managed and hasn't been identified as a young person that could be exploited, they're in the pool with many others that are likely to be exploited. That if that makes sense. And so we can't just single children out because they're neurodiverse and there's a potential that they could be exploited. It'll only come about because they're being managed, and if they're being managed, they've got neurodiversity issues, and there's certain things going on with that family and there's certain dynamics, then yes, that will trigger concerns around exploitation and agencies trying to manage that to prevent that from happening. But unless that's in place, then that's a difficult thing to manage. Does that make sense?
Thanks, Rob. I can see a few people nodding as well when you were speaking and when Deborah kind of raised that query around children with special educational needs, because I think that's something that does crop up a bit, doesn't it, in terms of that concern around exploitation, other themes of sort of contextual safeguarding. Has anyone got any other questions that they would like to ask Rob around policing? Oh, sorry, Pearl. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Same thing about the neurodiversity. When, say for instance, the child is arrested, or I'm not really sure how it works, because when you find out a child's been exploited, they've been found with drugs and all the rest of it. When the child gets to the police station and the appropriate adult is there, do they ask whether the child has a neurodiversion, or how does the arrest phase go? How does that part?
So if they've committed a crime, they will be arrested. Say if they were found in possession of drugs or found in possession of quite a substantial amount of money. But every time they come to a police station, that's the first thing that they're asked. And when they're at the police station, there's certain things that we can put into place around it. So if it's recognised that they have a neurodiversity or they have some mental health issue or whatever it might be, that's something that's quickly identified at the police station, and appropriate support can then be put into place. So yes, that is a first thing that's recognised and asked as soon as they come to the police station.
Do you mind if I can ask, what do they put in place for them?
Appropriate adult. We've got nurses in place. We work with the NHS, so we've always got health workers in custody. I mean, look, if it's that serious, then we might not even process them. There might be other means of dealing with that child. But if the crime is serious, then then there's no option that that child has to remain in custody, in which case they are dealt with quickly. We do have appropriate adults, and as I say, there is the appropriate support through the NHS here at the police stations that can provide that support for them.
And when
And
you
then
say
once
appropriate,
once they're released, it doesn't end there,
Mm.
because obviously then we have to put in the appropriate support through our services and through. So that's when we then have a strategy discussion with social services and other agencies, and then that's where the appropriate support then comes in from the outside.
Okay.
So it
the
doesn't just
appropriate
end at
adults
the police
either,
station. Yeah.
yeah. So the appropriate adult is they're either their parent or a carer or somebody of that nature.
It can be. It can be someone completely independent. It can be a family member. Parents are a little bit difficult, because obviously if the parents aren't involved and they are a family who aren't involved in that child being exploited, then yes, of course, we use the family members as a appropriate adult. If they are involved, or there's some sort of suggestion that they're not appropriate because they're known to agencies and everything else, then we would generally use an independent service.
Okay.
Anything else?
I think that silence, Rob,
That's
is
it, Sarah.
you
Yeah.
thoroughly answered people's questions. Thank you so much, Rob, for giving a whistle-stop tour through the kind of complex involvement of the police in terms of child safeguarding. Thank you very much. I wonder, Tina, should we hand over to yourself to do an introduction from health, and then Bianca will do a final session just around on accidental injury in babies.
Okay. Hello, my name is Tina Karema. I'm the name nurse for safeguarding children in Haringey, working under Whittington Health. I'm just going to give a brief overview of health visiting, school nursing, and how we sort of fit in with safeguarding. You can try and share my screen. Hopefully it works. I should have sent it to Sarah, really, but
No worries.
I thought I could do it. Not share my screen. Sorry. God. You can't see anything, can you?
No, not yet, Tina. Another option would be to post it in the chat, and then I can share my screen
and then
for
you
you
can
if you
share
like.
it.
Yeah, if you like, if that was helpful. Oh, something's happening. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Can you see?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tina.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk about the health visiting and school nursing and how we come into working with safeguarding. So I'm going to start by saying some of you may know about health visitors, some of you may not. So I'll just cover a quick explanation of what we are, who we are. So health visitors and school nurses are registered nurses or midwives that have done additional specialist training to be able to support children and their families. Health visitors work with children under 5, and once a child turns 5, they'll normally go to school, run about reception age. They'll then hand over to the school nurses, who will take over and support the children until they are 18. So school nurses are predominantly in schools. Health visitors are predominantly in the community. So they will go and do home visits. They might be at children's centres, because obviously under 5s will be at home with their parents. Some of the stuff we support families with is around feeding, sleep, safe sleeping, accident prevention, minor illnesses. We'll do developmental reviews to make sure that the children are meeting their developmental milestones. So who are these people in these teams? So we'll have health visitors who are registered nurses and school nurses. We'll also have people that support us, who are called health visitor assistants or school nursing assistants. We might have community staff nurses that have not done this. They're nurses as registered nurses, but they've not done the specialist registration, the specialist training yet. So again, they'll be working within that team. We'll have community nursery nurses, and they will predominantly do the follow-ups. So the health visitors will do the initial assessment. They'll go in, see the families, and then they'll do a plan of care of support. What does this family need? Do they need support around safe sleeping? Do they need support around behavior management? Do they need, general support around feeding, weaning, all of those sorts of things? So they may go in and do it themselves, or they may delegate it to staff nurses or nursery nurses. And then we've also got the safeguarding team, which is where I come in, and we have 3 safeguarding advisors, and the safeguarding comes in when there's some difficulty. So a parent might be struggling with parenting. There might be some issues around neglect. So the safeguarding team will come in to support the health visitors and school nurses to kind of see the wood from the trees. Sometimes when you're seeing these families, sometimes everything is sort of the same. So the safeguarding team will come in and say, actually, what's happening? What's going well with this family? What's not going so well? So you sort of have a little list. And we normally use the signs of safety model, where it's kind of 3 questions, what's going well, what's not going so well, and what are we worried about, or what needs to change. So we'll sort of use that to, explore with health visitors and school nurses, how to best support the family. And obviously, if things are not going very well, we will link in with our MASH team, Helen's team, where we will make a referral, and sort of follow that journey through. We also work with midwives, the hospitals, we'll work with the GPs, and also within our service. So we're community based. We will have the parent infant psychology service that will work with families around attachment and parental mental health. And we will also link in with the pediatric team, so Bianca's team, speech and language therapies, where they're supporting children with developmental delay, autism, and also we then work with social care and the voluntary sector like Home Start, as need arises. So we're sort of community based, and and sort of stretch out, and we'll go and support families with accessing services wherever need arises. So how do we deliver this service? So it's universal. So everybody with a child under the age of 18 can access school nursing or health visiting. And we will kind of offer it according to need. So we will assess their need, and we normally use the assessment triangle. I haven't put it on here, where we will look at, parenting, child, how the child is doing, and then their environment and any support network around them. So, we will sort of decide, are you universal? Are you doing well? You're just a typical mom, dad, family that have had a baby that needs, that's just trying to bring up their child well. Or are they targeted? Do they need a little bit more additional support, to be able to parent appropriately? Or the 3rd level is the specialist. So we call it Universal Plus, where there's some safeguarding concerns. And that's where, social care, police, we will sort of work as a multi-agency team. I'm going to expand a little bit on this. And obviously, throughout all of this, the safeguarding team within health will support health visitors and school nurses, to sometimes you're not sure whether it's, targeted or specialist plus. So the safeguarding team within health will have a conversation. We do safeguarding supervision regularly with staff, to kind of make sure that all children are sitting on the right levels of need.
And some families will move between the different levels. They might be universal, and then things get a little bit, difficult. They dip into targeted and they go back to universal, but we will constantly be reviewing where they sit. So the universal offer is, we will do antenatal. So we will work with the midwives, and if the person, the expectant parents, are vulnerable, so there's some needs that, we need to go in a little bit early. So we will send them all a letter, and then depending on what the midwives tell us, we might go in and see them antenatally between, 28 weeks and 36 weeks. Once they've had a baby, we will then go in and offer a new birth visit where we will do a child and family assessment. So, that assessment triangle, where it's quite a detailed visit. And it's normally run about between 10 days and 2 weeks. We will normally go in and see all families. We then offer a weight-only clinic, so they can come in and weigh their baby, ask their questions, depending on what's going on for them. We will then follow them up again at 6 to 8 weeks, between 6 and 8 weeks. And again, we can go and see them at home, or we can see them in clinic, depending again on need. We also do transferring visits. So if a family moves into Haringey from another area and they've got a child under the age of 5, we will see them. We will offer them a visit, and again, we will do the child and family assessment, to make sure that all is well. At the age of 1, we will see them again. So it's quite intensive, quite a lot of contact within the first 5 years. So we'll see them again at 1, to say, we'll do a 1-year check where we look at development to make sure the child is meeting their developmental milestones. And again, we'll see them again at 2. In between all of that, they might go to A&E. So again, if there's an issue where they've gone to A&E, let's say feeding, or they've had an accident and they need some accident support, the A&E, the hospital will notify the health visitors or school nurses to say, oh, this child needs a little bit more follow-up support. We'll also be liaising with our GPs. And again, if they identify a family that's presented to them and they feel actually, this family could do with some additional support, again, health visitors or school nurses will go in and support the family depending on the age of the child. And then targeted, obviously. So if we identify them as targeted, they'll get a bit more targeted support. So we will go in between 2 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks, depending on what they need. And normally the targeted support is around, might be parental mental health. They need to be a bit supported. Baby might be premature. They might be having issues around feeding, behavior management. Child may have they might be worried about disabilities or an early diagnosis of something that then, they're trying to get their head around. Again, the health visitor or school nurses will go in and support families with that. Then the Universal Partnership Plus, this is when there's safeguarding concerns and sort of working with, multi-agency team. So they might be on a child protection plan, or they might be looked after children in care, or on a CIM plan. And again, we will, depending on what the needs are, we will see them every 2 to 4 weeks, 2 to 4 weekly. And again, we will be working with our multi-agency team to make sure that children are safeguarded and families are supported. So some of the myths around health visiting and school nursing. It's optional. So, parents can choose to have a health visitor or a school nurse. They don't have to have it if they don't want to. We don't do emergency visits. So, I've had in the past where they'll say, oh, health visitor or school nurse can go in an emergency. Unfortunately, we don't go into in an emergency. We will work with our multi-agency professionals where there are safeguarding concerns. And, we might do a joint visit with a social worker, but, we're not an emergency service. Welfare checks, again, we don't do welfare checks. That's normally done by the police or social care. And our contact details. So, if you see a family and you're not sure whether they've got a health visitor or they don't remember their name, because again, there's a big team of health visitors, and sometimes families may not know who their health visitor is. So, those are the contact details. They can contact us, or they've moved in, you've come across them and they've just moved into the area, they're isolated, they don't know, where things are. Again, give us a call and we can link them up with a health visitor. We will sort of know what's going on in the area. So we will know about children's centres, all the different groups that are going on. So we'll have a kind of a pack of supportive information that we can offer families, which is great. And obviously school nursing, again, we will support children of school age. We will go into schools and again, work with schools to support children. Any questions?
Thanks, Tina, for kind of in a whistle-stop tour of health, which I know it can be quite complicated.
It is.
Thank you very much. Anyone got any questions at all for Tina, based on health's role in terms of safeguarding?
Might be useful just to mention about children presenting to A&E. And I suppose there's the other part of health within safeguarding. So the doctors in A&E and the nursing staff, everybody in health has got safeguarding training, of course, and would look out for concerns around neglect or exploitation or physical abuse in those children presenting to A&E, and that would then trigger the processes that would describe with referral to Helen and to the police. And there's a sort of feedback from A&E, isn't there, Tina, to the, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, so when let's say a child attends A&E and it might be a minor illness, it might be coughs, colds, the usual, tummy ache, diarrhea and vomiting, or it might be a serious injury where, parents have given an account, but it doesn't really match, the injury doesn't match what they've, what the parents have said. So in hospital, they will, look at it and assess, and they might need to do a referral to the police and MASH if the account does not explain, does not match the injuries. Once that's done, the child may be discharged back to the parents, or a strategy meeting may be held. The health visitors and school nurses will be notified by the hospital straight away to say, we've got this child that's coming to A&E with these concerns, or we've got this child that's coming to A&E, they need some additional support around safety. For example, it might be a 2-year-old that's, has had 3 episodes of A&E attendance where they've fallen, might be around supervision. It might just be, parents just need to look at their house and say, actually, we need to put some safety measures. We need to put a safety gate. We need to, look at where things are, because this child is having lots of accidents. So as a health assistant, school nurses, the hospital will contact us. They'll send us an A&E notification to say this child has come to the attention of A&E. Could you pop in and, offer some support? If it's a safeguarding issue, again, we will be notified straight away, and we will be part of, all the meetings that happen. So like a strategy meeting, a child protection conference. And after they've had all those meetings, we will continue to be involved. And, that's where they come under the Universal Partnership Plus. We will continue to be involved and, support the family, or if they go into foster care, we will continue to see them. So it just sort of continues. We don't stop as they go through the different levels of need. We just continue to support them. Is that what you were looking at, Bianca?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And I suppose also within your team, like for the children with additional needs, the therapists will also be involved, won't they? Speech and language or physio or whoever's involved. And of course, GPs are really key for health and safeguarding, because usually the whole family is registered with the GP, or it's really good practice that the whole family are. So they're the people that have an overall picture of a family and their whole health history, and that's only really held by GPs. So they have another really important role for health and safeguarding, and they should be part of when information is requested, like Helen's team or other teams from GPs.
And again, in health visitors and school nurses will work with the GPs, to say, oh, this family has come up, we're concerned about this family. They have regular monthly meetings with GPs to discuss any of their, any vulnerable families. And it might just be a little nugget of information. Oh, actually, an auntie lives in that house. They might give you some information that you may not have thought of. Which is really useful. So health visitors and school nurses will have continuous liaison with the GPs and the hospitals to kind of put the jigsaw puzzle together of a child's life.
Thanks very much, Tina. If no one's got any other additional questions, Bianca, would now be a good time to move on to your section around sort of physical abuse.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Shall I share your slides for you?
Yes. I was just reflecting, this is our first time doing this session, so it will be really nice to have, I know we don't have many people, but feedback from people about the relevance of this to them. And one thing I was thinking that might be useful next time we present this is that at the end of this session, these sessions, we might be able to think about a case, maybe a made-up case, to illustrate how health, social care and police are working together. So it'd be good if you could comment at the end on everything. That will help us with planning, won't it, Sarah? For the future.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Bianca. I've got a feedback form actually. I'll post that in
Brilliant.
the chat as well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about something a little bit more specific, one particular area of child protection, and I'm going to talk a little bit about physical abuse, and that is partly because in Haringey we've had a big drive about thinking particularly about injuries in babies and making sure people recognise that, and that everybody in the borough really knows about responding to injuries in babies. And the second reason is because I think we all see in the media every so often these really terrible, severe cases of physical abuse, and it continues to be a problem, and so it's a good thing for people to have an awareness of. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so if we think about what is physical abuse, so it's, as it says, it's about when somebody hurts or harms a child or young person on purpose, and it might be any of these things which are listed here. So anything causing physical harm.
Oh, I think Bianca might have just dropped off. I'm just looking. Oh dear, I wonder if her internet connection dipped. I'm so sorry about that. Let me see if I can try and request for her to join and see if that works. So typical, isn't it? Sort of mid-flow. Either that or maybe her battery died or something like that. I'm just trying to dial her in now, see if that works. Please bear with us for a few minutes.
This is a good opportunity to take a breath.
Yeah.
Just integrate.
Yeah, definitely. I just just tried to ring, it didn't work. In the meantime, I'll stop sharing and I'll just post in the chat the feedback form. If that's helpful. That gives people a moment, as you say, a breath to complete that. I've just posted the feedback form in the chat. So grateful to those of you from the voluntary sector. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to give us some feedback, as Bianca was saying, this is our first one, so happy to take back any kind of areas that you think we could share with you or improve on, or things that you really wanted to know about but wasn't discussed today. Please let us know. We can incorporate that into a future session, hopefully in November this year.
Sarah, do you want me to copy this link into the email that goes out afterwards?
Ah, that'd be amazing. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great, Osha. Thanks. Oh, bless Bianca. I bet she's probably panicking as well, trying desperately to get back in. It's one of those kind of presenter nightmares, isn't it? Oh dear. I'll just check that she's not tried to ring my mobile. Oh, hi, Bianca. Hello. Oh, don't worry. One of those things. Oh, you're a little bit crackly, but hopefully the microphone will settle in. I'll reshare my screen again.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, no worries. I was just saying it's one of those things, isn't it, that just kind of happens.
No, I think I
it
pushed
might
the wrong
help
thing.
if we all turn our cameras off, you know. I know it's not ideal, but it just might help with the
Ah,
reception.
with the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Helen. Okay, I'll turn my camera off now.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just defining physical abuse. Next slide, please. So the particular things I just wanted to mention here was, as I said, about injuries in non-mobile babies, which we'll define. Thinking about injuries in older children and what are the challenges that we have in recognising and responding to non-accidental injury or physical abuse. Next slide. So if we think about babies first, so a non-mobile infant, that is, if we think of a baby, so all babies under 6 months, and then babies that might be able to roll over, say front to back or back to front, but they can't crawl, they don't bottom shuffle, they can't pull themselves up to stand, so they can't really move around, as it were. And although we've got an age there, we have to think that some babies will be quite delayed in their development. And so you might have a child who's significantly older, who's not independently mobile. So we need to think about those children too. And when we say injury, it could be anything, but it's most often a bruise in babies that we worry about. Next slide. So for example, you might see a baby somewhere in a baby group or anywhere really, and you notice that there's a bruise on their cheek. And it could be anywhere on the baby. It could be on an arm or a leg, or it doesn't really matter where it is, but maybe even a tiny bruise, like a centimetre bruise. And mum says she dropped her phone onto the baby, and that's how the baby got the bruise. So in an older child that's moving around, we need to think about bruises, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but probably a tiny bruise like that somewhere on the child, we might be able to explain. Whereas on a baby like this, we shouldn't really take that at face value, and that's something we need to be concerned about. Next slide. So why is that important? So when we look at all the really terrible and serious child protection cases where children get either killed sadly or life-changing injuries, It happens to older children, but young babies are particularly at risk because they are fragile. And so any physical abuse for a young baby is really dangerous. And we know that babies, that as children move around more, they tend to get more bruises. So we know that toddlers who have kept falling on their shins or toddle into the corner of the table and get these bruises on their forehead, we know that they're going to get bruises as part of their developing and exploring. But babies that are not moving themselves are not going to be able to get bruises themselves. It's quite unusual for babies to get bruises in their everyday care. It's not impossible. We know that babies get dropped or fall off things. Things do happen, but we don't expect, for example, a baby that rolls over and hits a hand on the side of the cot to have enough force to get a bruise. Usually, parents will be very aware if there's been an accidental injury to the baby that they're caring for. The other thing that's been seen is that in babies it can be difficult to see if there's an underlying injury. So in a toddler, for example, if they had a fracture of a bone in their leg, they wouldn't walk on it. So we'd be able to see it. Or in an older baby, they might not move their arm if it's injured. But in a small baby, that can actually be quite difficult to notice. And there are particular injuries, for example, rib fractures, that really might not have any symptoms at all apart from the baby being a bit unsettled. And the other thing that's been found is that these tiny bruises, like the one that I described before, can be something called a sentinel injury, which somehow it's noticed, somebody had noticed it, a little mark or a little bruise like that, and then maybe not really thought much of it. And then sometime later, that baby's gone on to be quite significantly injured. And then when you look back, you think that little bruise, oh, that was like a precursor, a sentinel injury to show us something wasn't right. And then something really severe happened. So those are the reasons why we want to be very careful about injuries, bruises in little babies. Next slide. Okay. So the National Safeguarding Panel is a group where all of the serious incidents, if there's a serious safeguarding incident and a child is badly harmed or dies, then the local authority, the safeguarding board, in fact, have to have a review of that. And all the reviews from all over the country go to this National Safeguarding Review Panel, which is useful because they can look at the themes and they can look what's happening over the whole country and suggest things that people might want to think about. And what they said was, for bruises in little babies, every time you see that, there needs to be a multi-agency discussion. So that means police and social care and health. And there needs to be a medical review to decide what to do. And that isn't so that somebody has an accident with their baby, which we know might happen, they drop them by mistake. It isn't to make that into a massive deal and get those parents into trouble. It is about thinking carefully and using the best information we've got to make a decision. So I can't remember who said it before. Maybe I think it was Helen who was saying people don't make decisions in isolation. So the reason for this is so that as a group, there can be a decision made about what's the best way forward, which might well be to say, okay, we think this is an accident, we haven't had any other concerns, everything else is fine, and that's the end of it. But it might also be actually we've got quite a lot of concerns that we found by talking together, and we need to think about this more and do more investigations. Next slide. So what do we need to do? So according to this guidance and what we said our Haringey guidance is that if somebody notices a bruise or an injury on a pre-mobile baby, then that person needs to make the referral to social care. And then when social care have that referral, then they'll arrange for that baby to have a medical review, and there'll be a multi-agency discussion to determine what to do next. Next slide. So I think it's important to highlight that this is potentially a difficult process for families, no matter how much you might say to a family, this is our process, this is what we have to follow. For any family, it's going to feel very difficult because they're going to feel that they're being blamed for whatever's been seen for their baby. And the feedback that we've had on things that can make it easier for families is that there needs to be good communication with families about what's going on, and that needs to be open with families unless you're worried about the safety of the child, and then you need to be talking to other professionals and seeking advice. And there needs to be good communication between the different agencies, and we should be gathering feedback from families to see how we can improve. Okay, so any questions about babies? Or I can take questions at the end. I can't see anyone's hands or anything.
I can't see any hands either, Bianca.
Okay. So if we talk about, think about older children, older babies, infants and children, bruising in non-mobile infants is something I've really emphasised, but all ages are can be subject to physical abuse. And in fact, the recent cases, which you may have seen, Sarah Sharif, I think she was at the primary school age, and then Star Hobson was 2, and Arthur Limbardo James was also primary school age, and those were all children who really sadly died from physical abuse. And the same principles are there. We need to have a medical opinion, we need to follow proper processes, and use all the information we can get for decision making about those cases. So next slide. So just really briefly, if we think about bruising in children, I was saying that we know children get accidental bruises, and you can see there sort of on the forehead, on the shins, on that sort of bony bit at the back, because there's not so much softness there. So if you bump yourself, you get a bruise more easily. But there are places that we are particularly associated with non-accidental injury, and those are like the cheeks, the tummy, the soft bit of the thighs, insides of the arms that you can see there. And of course, if you've got a mark that looks like something, so if you've got like a linear mark that looks as if it's made with something straight, then that's going to be from an implement, or a slap mark has a particular look to it as well. Having said that, any bruise could be accidental or non-accidental, so it's really about understanding the story and the context. Next slide. Okay, so I think we've just said that. I think we can move on to the next one. Okay, it's really important to think about children with disabilities. We know that they actually have a higher risk of physical abuse. They're very dependent, some children, on their carers, and their ability to communicate what's happening to them can be quite limited. It's really important to think what is their baseline mobility? Do they have any aids or things which might cause these bruises? And to think that actually accidental falls should be less common. So we have to have a real high awareness, because there are additional barriers to recognising physical abuse in children with disabilities, but we also know that it is unfortunately more likely. Next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned, sadly, physical abuse is a pervasive problem, and we know from Lord Laming all the way back more than 20 years ago. Terribly, we had Victoria Climbier and we had Peter Connolly, and we've had these recent cases that I mentioned. So it remains a really difficult problem. And why is that? Just think about that briefly. Next slide. Okay, so I suppose what are the barriers to recognising it and us acting to protect children? Next slide. Okay, so some of the things I thought about when I was thinking this through is that sometimes we think about neglect, and we think, oh, this injury, or the reason this child's had 3 or 4 injuries, one after each other, is more about neglect or more about poor supervision. We can explain things away. And I think because nobody really wants to think about physical abuse in children, there can be this idea of sort of being a bit optimistic and going with the explanation, because we don't really want to think that this is something that's potentially going on. I think we're quite accepting of explanations given by parents, and most of us are working with families. So for me as a paediatrician, I'm always working with the family. I accept what they say to me in all areas of my work. But when I'm doing this work, I've really got to be quite careful about accepting explanations without thinking them through very carefully. And sadly, people do lie about injuries sometimes, which we don't expect, but we have to have that in our mind. Infants, as we said, sometimes there can be absolutely nothing visible on the child at all, even though there's been physical abuse. And non-verbal children and children with communication difficulties can find it really hard to explain. Older children can be quite scared to say what happened sometimes. It can be really difficult for them to say. The professional optimism we've mentioned, and also sometimes children just becoming invisible. So, for example, a child that may have been taken out of school, a baby that's not going to nursery or any play groups, they can become invisible and nobody knows what's happening to them. Next slide. So there was quite a big review in response to these two children that I mentioned before, and there were some points that I think are quite relevant to us to think about from that. Next slide. So there were some common things between these two children, and I think that's why they put them together. So one was that in both of them, wider family members were really worried about the children. So grandparents were very worried and they weren't really listened to by services, and some of it was put down as being malicious. It was dismissed, but there was this theme that the family were not listened to. And the second thing was that the voices were just not heard. So I mentioned about children not being visible, being sort of not visible, but when they are visible, it's about, can we actually hear what they're saying? And that might be what they're saying, but it might also be through how they're behaving, how they're looking, all those different things about them. The other thing is that it's really important that as professionals, police, social care and health, that we follow the processes that we've got if we're responding to concerns of physical abuse. And as you can imagine, everything can be quite chaotic in a way. There's so many things going on, so many things to think about, and it becomes more and more important then for us to follow our process and work together so that we can think things through clearly and come to the best that we can with the information that we've got. The other thing about both these cases was that there were photographs which were provided by family members, and I think quite sadly the photos from one of the children were on the news, and it felt like anybody looking at those could see how awful the bruising was on that baby, on the child, but somehow there wasn't a robust response to those photographs. So I really wanted to flag here, thinking about what family members are saying, and if there are photographs of injuries, then we need to be not dismissive of those, not saying, oh, we don't know when they were taken or who they were, etc., but really, really thinking very carefully about them. Next slide. So I suppose in conclusion about injuries, for those very small babies, very strict. If you see an injury, then that needs to be a referral to social care. In older children, thinking about non-accidental injury, so being curious, actually maybe finding out a little bit more, thinking about it. Does it make sense what you've been told? Sort of don't be shy or nervous to just stop and question. And then I think thinking the unthinkable, which can be a really difficult thing for us because that's not what we want to think happens to children that are around us. And be careful, be precise. So don't think, oh, I sort of understood that, or that's probably okay, or this is not the area to not be precise. Get advice from Helen's team, make referrals. Next slide. Okay, so I think I've said this. We've said about smaller babies, said about older children, and I suppose for you, it's about knowing the guidance and process within your own organisation, and then how you follow that and link in with social care. Next slide. That's it. Okay, any questions?
Put my camera back on. Hopefully
Thank
everyone
you.
else can do the same. Thank you. Thanks very much, Bianca. Has anyone got any questions at all for Bianca around non-accidental injury in non-mobile babies, or also in older children as well?
I've got 2 questions.
Hi, Grace.
With the bruises, like how can you tell, like, so on different skin tones, like is there kind of like, is there a scale, like an image that people can sort of like have a look at and just to like double check, like, okay, you know, what does bruising look like on this skin, on this skin, on this skin?
So there aren't the resources as there should be, actually, and that's fairly recently sort of highlighted and recognised, because most of the literature and the pictures are bruising on white skin. So I think that's something that is, people are trying to bring together images, you know, like for teaching and for training. I think potentially some bruises are missed because of skin tone, and yeah, and that is definitely a problem. The other area, I suppose, is about you know, like the blue spots, those sort of birthmarks. They can also be looked at as being bruises. So what we've said about those is sort of a cautious approach. So if you don't know if a mark is a birthmark or not, and it's not documented anywhere, you follow this approach, but you say to the family, I think it's probably a birthmark, but I just have to check. And then, so if a health visitor saw that, for example, they'd say to they would call social care and say to Helen's team, I think it's a mark, it could be a bruise, could be a birthmark, probably a birthmark. And then when they have their paediatric review, that can be clarified, hopefully with us trying to make as less stress to the family as possible, but making sure that then we don't miss a bruise. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely a problem.
So it's just like it's a resource that will come out sometime soon.
Yeah, it's being. I'm not sure. It's nationally being developed. It's a national thing that the training for doctors and health staff and things has typically been, not being representative. Yeah.
Thank you. And then more widely, I suppose, I'm sort of wanting, I understand that, like, you know, safeguarding is everybody's responsibility, and that if you should be curious, you should report to your line manager or to the designated safeguarding lead if you think, oh, actually, you know, something's happened, somebody said something. And you do need to work with the family where possible. Obviously, if the child's not at like immediate risk or harm. But if you're trying to work with them and they don't want to engage, I suppose I'm trying to think about consents. Like, you need the parent's consent or you don't need it. Like, if you feel like there's any sort of type of harm, like they might need just early help or that type of thing, you still report it.
So if you were asking me about, and Helen's a good person to answer this as well, if you're asking me about physical abuse, then I think, and that's your concern, then you don't need the parental consent to report that, because you know, you're worried about the physical safety of the child. And I suppose I want to emphasize a little bit about those babies, that there's a risk that they could have quite a significant injury, and that becomes then urgent. So it's sort of like, we would say that they should have things the same day to make sure that they're actually okay, even for these tiny little bruises. So I'll let Helen answer about discussions with family and consent, but that would be my
yeah, of course.
Bianca.
So yes, like, well, just reiterating what Bianca said about injuries or concerns of any sort of safeguarding nature, you don't need consent. You just report them straight away and speak to MASH. If if you're thinking about early help, and you think, oh, you know, this family would really benefit from some early help, yes, that is consent based. Yes, it is. And I think it is, you know, trying to look at the positives about, you know, the early help, what that can bring. And if families are going absolutely no way, don't make referral, don't want to know, then that's kind of it, and you've got
Okay.
nowhere to go with
Yeah.
that. If you but the other option is you can say to families, say, look, let me make a referral to MASH, let them have that conversation with you and talk about you know, what is on offer and what you can be supported with. And you know, so it's almost like in stages. So if you start, you know, if you go to, let me make the referral to MASH and see what they can offer you, is sometimes perhaps easier than saying to a family, this is what, you know, you need as the end outcome, so just sort of do it in slowly in stages. And the other thing, in terms of parenting, the early help offer and parenting courses, you don't need a referral to MASH to access parenting courses. They're all on the internet.
On the Haringey website.
Yeah, on the Haringey website. Yeah, in terms of parent, I think there's a couple you can't access without a referral, but generally they're all there. So again, it's just another, you know, I think parenting support would be good. Can we look at making this referral? And but yeah, that's what I sort of tend to say to people, is do it in stages rather than like wham, you need this support. But anything safeguarding, any bruises, any concerns, just ring MASH and have that conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Grace. Some really good questions there, but yeah, helpful pointers as well. Thank you, Bianca and Helen. Are there any final questions for any of the presenters really before? Oh, Deborah, go for it.
I went to a course, The Legacy of Victoria Colombier, last week, and sort of like 25 years after, and the reports that were written. So, you know, there's always learnings after these types of major cases. However, somebody had mentioned earlier that Star's grandparents had made some sort of referral, and I'm just trying to understand, why wasn't that investigated, or was it investigated and there was no case to answer, or do we know what actually happened there?
Yeah, so you can also, if you, well, maybe Sarah can put it in the chat, the report, there's this report called Child Protection in England, so you can have a look at that and you can see it. And I think in the, and it's quite open and honest about the mistakes that were made. I think in that case, it was felt that the family were being malicious. So the mum and her partner presented it as the family are malicious. I think that was in both those cases, and that wasn't really questioned. So it's and it is something that it's said quite often, and there are times when people make malicious referrals. But I suppose it's about really analysing that. And the thing that also went wrong in both those cases is people didn't share information properly. So for Star, the doctor who saw her and did see some bruises, a junior doctor, she didn't have all the background information on the other concerns. So I think sadly, a lot of the themes from the serious case reviews about communication, etc., those continue to be difficult. But it is a really sad read, but it is for understanding where things go wrong. It's a useful thing to have read. Yeah.
I think it's quite sad in that case as well. Both of those children, that it sort of occurred in the context of COVID, didn't it? Which I guess would have compounded some of the challenges with identifying risk.
Yeah. but it's that, and as I was saying about being quite careful and precise. Like Helen and I would often have a conversation, wouldn't we, Helen? And you know, we just to make sure that we've got those details properly clear, and we know, yeah.
And I was going to say about the, you know, that idea of sharing of information and making sure you share all the information and not just which bits you think are important, because often it's the little things which are, you know, people see things differently. So I might tell a story, and out of that story you pick up 5 points, but the next person might pick up 5 different points. So it's making sure you know all that information shared. And I guess just going back to Star and Arthur, one of the things was the referrals to MASH in the photos, and you know that not progressing. And I think again it's about the malicious thing is a bit of a bugbear of mine, because yes, we do get malicious referrals, we do, but how do you know unless you look at it fully? Because how do you know this one's malicious but this one's not malicious unless you sort of really look at that and investigate and think about that. But and if people, just to say about the photos, so we don't take photos of children. We wouldn't take photos of children. But if you're in a house or you're speaking to a family member and they get their phone and go, look, I've took a photo of that, I'll show you this bruise, then ask them to send you that photo, and send that in to MASH, you know, speak to MASH and send that in. So we don't go around, and I would encourage anyone not to go around taking photos of children. But similarly, if somebody says, I have a photo and I can show you that, then please don't be afraid of saying, can you send me that? You know, I need to do something about that, because that I'm worried about that. So, you know, don't shy away from, you know, seeing that. Obviously not photos of private parts, but photos of bruises on arms, legs, you know, backs, bodies. Please make sure you ask for them photos and make that referral, because it is very important. And now, you know, it's a new era of phones and cameras and people taking videos and pictures, and we know it happens, and it happened in Arthur's case, and you know, they were taking videos of him suffering. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent then.
No,
I apologize.
relevant. No, it's a very relevant one. Are there any additional questions at all? As if not, we finished about sort of 10 minutes or so early. Just to say thank you so much to our presenters today, to Helen, Rob, Bianca and Tina. Really grateful for you giving up what's almost sort of 2 hours of your time to do a to take questions and also talk about each of your services. If there are any additional questions that you think of after that you really wish you'd known about, would you pop that onto the feedback form that I've posted into the chat? That'd be really helpful, and I can take those questions away and ask Bianca, Helen, Tina, or Rob if they can helpfully respond. Also helpful to know if this style of presentation is helpful to you. I know Bianca mentioned maybe if we included a sort of case scenario that involved the 3 statutory partners, if that would be useful to sort of bring some of what's been discussed to life. Anything else that you think that we need to incorporate?
The other thing, Sarah, sorry,
yeah.
I was reflecting on this, is it would be useful to have someone from schools, wouldn't it, to talk about education role in safeguarding. I was just thinking, so yeah. So and any comments people have got would be, and also about how to reach to more, you know, more people, what would make it easier. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bianca. I'll look into the education representative, and yeah, definitely in terms of reach, we want this to be useful and relevant to all. So yeah, please let us know how else we can speak to partners for the voluntary sector and about this training offer. Thank you so much for your time. Please fill out the feedback form and have a good rest of your Monday and a good week. Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
I'll
Thank
stop
you all.
Thank
recording.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Sarah, can I just
Yeah.
catch up with you?
Yeah, I've just